Hey everybody, sorry about that. We had some serious technical difficulties and we actually didn't figure them out. So we'll just have to we'll have to figure that out for you next week. But so I'll be playing videos for Tim later, as you'll see, and hopefully we get it done correctly that way. So obviously a lot happened in the last week. Unless you lived under a rock, you probably know that. We had we had a very improper pulling over of an army lieutenant. Looked really bad. We're going to talk about that. Then you had the Duante Wright shooting, fatal shooting. That's resulted in massive unrest. A lot more of the same George Floyd kind of criticisms. We'll talk about that, and we'll talk about some of the fallout from it. And then we'll also give you an update on the Derek Chauvin trial, because that has now switched to the defense, and now the defense is giving some of they're doing their counter punches. So we'll see what we have to say about that. But for now, I guess we can start with some less serious things. Tim, do you have anything?
I don't have anything too unserious this week, actually.
Wait, let me go then. I got you.
All right.
So I love the idea of nuclear in general, but also nuclear fusion, right, as opposed to fission, right? So the reactors that we have right now are nuclear fission reactors. These are enriched uranium rods radiating each other, making water boil.
It doesn't have to be uranium.
Oh, stop it. Plutonium, whatever.
No, thorium. There's many different things that can be used.
Beryllium. Is beryllium radioactive? I don't know.
Probably, but I don't know of it being one that can be used for energy.
Isn't calcium radioactive? I don't know. There's stuff you wouldn't think is, but it just has like a half-life of like 1 million years or something. All right. Anyways, okay. So I love this, right? So all of the debates that we're having about, solar panels and wind technology and green technology in general, like all of it starts to become obsolete, except for portability things like cars with batteries, right? That you're still going to need that in the future unless we somehow make all the roads have like electrical charge lines like the trolleys do. But nuclear fusion is starting to look like it's a viable alternative. And I have this article pulled up from Popular Mechanics saying, this nuclear reactor just made fusion viable by 2030. Now, to be fair, we have been hearing for a long time that nuclear fusion is just right around the corner. We need a little bit more money, a little bit more research, and we're almost there. So
it's what, 10 years or 20 years out, every 10 or 20 years? I forget.
Right, something like that. Yeah, this crops up again. But before they haven't had what happened here, which is that they actually achieved a startup for a certain amount of time, right? It was only a couple seconds. But this is starting to become something that could be very real, right? And this could solve so many of the problems because you don't have any byproduct like regular nuclear facilities. There's no radiation. These things don't melt down. They might explode from the pressure, but that's it, right? It just burns the factory down or the plant down. Like it's honestly, fusion is the holy grail of energy as far as I can tell. Now, Tim, I don't know if you've heard something about that, but
yeah,
that's nice.
I know a fair amount about it. I said I know a fair amount about it, and yeah, there's a lot of different companies that are shooting for it right now. There's multiple different ways they're approaching to do it. My bet is that it is going to be the future of our energy solutions, but when is the question? It isn't going to be by 2030.
You don't think so?
No, not that we won't have not that we won't have a reactor by then that is capable of producing energy. I think that's possible by then, but nothing that is commercialized on the scale of functionability for actually providing power to the grid or anything like that. It's going to be more of a test rig. I mean, they're building this gigantic Tucahoma style. I forget what the exact name of that is, but reactor.
Not the one that's longer. It's not the one that's the donut, right?
It's the donut one.
Yeah, it is the donut one.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
That they're building in Europe. I want to say it's in Europe, and it's like some billions of dollars a project, and it's huge. And all of this is only to prove the concept that you can actually generate more energy than it takes to run it.
Right.
The math has been there for this since like the 50s or 60s.
Well, I mean, the sun's been up there for 4 billion years, as far as I understand.
Yeah, so, I mean, okay, the point of saying, the math works, that it can happen. I mean, the math of like saying that we, with using materials, could do this. Materials here on Earth. I mean, the difference with the sun is anything you put up there melts. There's no control of that energy. It's a runaway nuclear reaction. Yeah, except Superman. But yeah, I actually do think it's something we're going to see. It's probably going to take over the energy needs in the future, and I expect we'll see it in our lifetimes. But I don't know that it's going to be the next 10 years.
Right, and it's powered by what? Like hydrogen? You know what I'm saying? Like one of the most abundant molecules in the universe. It's second one, maybe. Yeah, the most abundant molecule in the universe, from what I understand. Right ahead of hydrogen or helium.
I don't know. Yeah, it might be the most abundant, but it's difficult to create and it's difficult to capture, and it's
is it
not super? Yeah. They're like helium is very scarce actually on the planet.
Well, helium is. What about hydrogen? I mean, they fill up whole balloons.
Hydrogen's not hydrogen. You just stick a battery in some water and
right, exactly. Yeah, hydrolysis. Everybody remembers from 7th grade.
Yeah,
that was always fun.
It'll happen, and it works. It's very, very complicated. The way that they're doing it, and most of them that seem to be, and I think the one I was mentioning is this way. Is they're generating a plasma field that is controlled by very powerful electromagnets that maintain this plasma field in a sphere that then then the plasma field itself can hold the fission material and keep that heat from melting all of the infrastructure that's generating the plasma field, right? Because the pressure and the heat that these things have to be at is at a level that any structure, anything we create to try and make this would just melt. So
isn't it like millions degrees Celsius? I don't want.
Yeah, it's ridiculously. It's ridiculous. Yeah, it's a massive, and you have to pump all this energy in to get these things to fuse, and then, and that's not to get it started. It's to keep it going. It doesn't self fuel necessarily.
Right, but of course, the idea is to start generating the energy that then runs the electromagnets, right? So it's self-sustaining, right? So you put in an initial startup energy, so you get all these magnets that help compress and keep the plasma in the center without touching anything.
Yeah.
And then this fusion starts generating energy, and that energy then gets fed back into the electromagnets, which keeps everything in place, and then you use the excess as the energy output, theoretically.
Right. Yeah, and I don't remember the percentages. It might be like 120% power generation from power in or something at optimal situations. It's not like a ton. It's not like you double the energy. And they've been able to run these things for some durations of times, but they've never been able to get energy out in excess of what's been put in. The systems just aren't efficient enough. There's too many losses. There's too many other things. So they've been able to do it and get energy out, but the energy out's been like 60, 70% of the energy in, which isn't very good for energy generation.
Correct.
So, but yeah, I do think we'll see it. I think that fusion nuclear power also is a good option going forward.
It does generate waste, right? And that there's difficult questions as to do with what do you do with the depleted rods?
Yeah.
Like radioactive stuff is just strange to figure out what to do with anyways,
Yeah, there are some other options that have never taken off. I've been learning a little more. I've heard over the many years about thorium. And then more recently, I guess it's becoming popular again. So I started doing some research on it. And from what I understand, unlike uranium plants, where if the cooling fails or any of these other things fail, it then overheats, has a meltdown, and it becomes an uncontrollable reaction until the material is spent, right? And that's where you get these meltdowns that happen. Thorium is the ability to have it set up where if it starts to overheat, the system fails in a direction that cancels the reaction and stops it. I'm not deep enough into the science to know why you can't do it with the other one versus this one, other than I know that one may be more sensitive to the neutrons hitting their nuclei than the other, so maybe it's easier to stop one than the other or something like that.
That's
but
interesting. Well, what you just described right there is the difference between the RGBMK reactors that the Soviet Union used and the light water fusion reactors or fission reactors that the United States and Western countries use. Right? Ours generally typically don't tend to melt down in the way that Chernobyl, for example, melted down or exploded in. They tend to. It's complicated, but they're set up in different ways where when the light water reactor starts failing, that it stops. The reactivity goes down as opposed to goes up in the Soviet ones. So
yeah, and I know that I believe that with thorium also the byproduct is not radioactive or not as long term or harsh of radioactive. I can't recall offhand, but it's much better.
Cool. Yeah, so I just wanted to share that, we're all about the doom and gloom on this show, but it pays to pay attention to the fact that if we just survive the next 20 or 30 years, there will be some things that are so amazing we can't even think about it right now. You don't even know what it's going to be, but this might be one of them, right? This is virtually, if you can replicate this, it's expensive to start up, but if you get a bunch of these things going around the country, it's virtually unlimited energy for a very, very low cost with very, very little side effects, if any. And that's something to look forward to.
The cost of the material to run it is low. The cost of the facility is astronomical.
Yeah, but those are all numbers from test facilities, right? Test facilities are always expensive.
Yeah. Well, the infrastructure for these is going to be expensive. I'm not saying that it won't be spent or shouldn't be. It should be. It just is the reason I mentioned it's going to take a while for it to, even once the science is proven, the technology is capable to get it implemented, because we're going to have billions and billions and billions of dollars put into infrastructure upgrades to be able to do it.
Right.
But anyway, yeah, that's good. Let's get some free energy up in this business.
Yeah. No free. Very low cost though. Capitalism. Very good.
I don't know why we can't just throw out a really long extension cord to the sun and
right. Yeah.
So like I said, I didn't have any that were really low key or fun or funny or whatever, but this one I had that is kind of an interesting take. So for those just listening, Brian Stelter, I guess he's a Fox News host. I'm not familiar with him myself.
Brian Stelter is a CNN Media Watch.
Okay. So Brian Stelter's the one that's posting this guy then. So that's okay.
Yes.
Oh, so Jesse Waters. Sorry, Jesse Waters, yes. Fox News host. So Jesse Waters says, now I am pro-paternity. Talking about his newborn son, he says, I used to mock people for taking paternity. He's talking about paternity leave. I used to think it was a big ruse, but now I wish I could take 6 weeks. All right, so he just had a kid. Now he realizes, oh God, this is pretty cool. I want to be able to spend more time with him, that kind of shit. So I just thought it was an interesting example of what happens. I feel like a lot, which is until you've experienced something and gone through something, you have this jaded view of it, and your stance is limited in scope. I guess your views are really limited in scope, and going through it changes your mind. So I'm glad that he's
telling me that college Marxists should probably go out into the workforce before they criticize capitalism.
I guess I'm saying that as equally as I'm saying anti-BLM people should try being black and getting right. It works on all sides.
Yeah, of course it does. I'm curious. Did does that resonate with you at all? I know that you told me that I think maybe your stance on abortion changed. I think before and after you had kids.
My personal stance did, yes. So, my political stance didn't really change because, my moral political stance is kind of like let people live their life.
I'm good with that distinction.
But personally, yeah. So before I had kids, my wife was, in her late 30s when we had our first kid. And, that's the age where you're increased risk for Down syndrome and other, genetic diseases. And so we were trying to get the testing done, blood testing done that shows you ahead of time if they had them. We didn't know what we would do with results from the blood tests. If it came back and said, yeah, they're at really high risk for having Down syndrome or something. But we were getting the testing done anyway. And the testing kept coming back abnormal. They weren't able to give us results from it. So they said, look, if you really want this information, we have to go in and do, I forget the name of the damn thing now, but they put a needle through the sac into the baby, take a sample of the skin cells there, and then test the cells directly.
I would be very, very nervous about that.
Yeah. And so, I mean, they said it's super safe to do it all the time, et cetera, right? And I'm like,
you're like, yeah, okay.
So, in talking with the doctor, being an engineer brain here, I was like, okay, so what's the, so more information. We had a few miscarriages prior to this pregnancy. So we were already nervous about the pregnancy making full term. And so we were like, so what's the increase in rate of miscarriage, based of having this? And they said, well, and I'm spitballing the numbers now because it's been long enough, I don't recall. But let's say they said it's 1 in 10,000 that it's that you have a miscarriage at this point now.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you, Amanda. It's an amniocentesis. That's right. So that's the name of that procedure. So it was 1 in 10,000 that you have a miscarriage at this point in the pregnancy with nothing done. And if you did an amniocentesis, it was like 100 in 100,000 or whatever is the numbers again. And I'm like, or no, that's the other way around. Flip those numbers. Sorry. Anyway, it worked out that the numbers weren't exactly the same, but if you did some basic multiplication by 10 and figured it out, it was less risky to do an amniocentesis based on their numbers. And so I was like, your numbers are wrong for sure. Like, how is it less risky? Like, let me poke a hole in the baby sac. Now your pregnancy is more likely to go to full term. At best case, it should be no impact. That would be okay.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Like, so anyway, my wife and I started talking about it, and we said, look, would we, what would we do if we got the information? We said we didn't know. Abortion was on the table, but we didn't know if we would choose. We couldn't make that decision until the information was in front of us. But the bottom line was we'd already had a couple of miscarriages, and if we had another one and we had done this procedure, we didn't know how we'd live with ourselves without knowing if we caused it, right? If we did use the risk. So we decided we weren't going to do the procedure. Luckily, our child came out perfect. But at the time, abortion was on the table. After having our first child, we both had agreed, we were like, we never could ever abort a child, ever.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like, so now, like with our second one, if something would have come up and they would have had, we would have known that they had high chance for Down syndrome or something, it wouldn't even have been a thought. It wouldn't even have been an option, right? So my personal view on abortion 100% changed, but my view on politically, letting someone make their own decision didn't.
Now, we don't need to dwell on this too long, but I suppose then the question extends out to what obviously we're a rights-based culture. It's everybody's right to vote. Now, do you think the young whippersnappers who have never had kids should be able to vote about abortion rights?
That's a great question. It's hard to say no because
and I would say Well, I mean, I think it's obvious. This is America. If you're 18 years old, you can vote, right? So, I mean, that is the stance. But there is also the question. I mean, you have that feeling. You went through it. You now feel differently about something that you felt differently about before. It's like, well, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the problem with democracy. And we've talked about it before, but and I don't remember who said this quote or I heard it, but
man, someone's gonna clip that. It's like, look at these two guys. Problem with democracy.
Democracy is the tyranny of the uninformed, right?
Hey,
is a quote that I love, and it's very true, right? I mean, what if there's a bill about the military in some way or another, something to the military that really affects them, and that if you've been in the military, what this is like, and you have a feeling about it. I have no fucking clue, but I can vote. Yeah,
bill about the cops.
Exactly, and so that's the. I mean, there's great things about democracy, but one of its downfalls, in my opinion, is that it is the tyranny of the uninformed. The people that don't know what they're talking about have a say, and so in a perfect world, I'd say no. You have to know what you're talking about. You'd have to have some knowledge or experience in something to make a decision about it for the entire country, because that's basically what you're doing when you vote.
Right.
But the other side of it is like that doesn't work in democracy. It's not what it's not how our country.
No. I mean, it's built in that it's not that way. I mean, the founding fathers I believe they specifically advocated for an educated population, and hence we have public schools. So I mean, like we're despite all the complaining about public school, a lot of it justified. We're much better than a completely non-educated populace. It's just I guess, how much can you expect? But that's not even education, right? What you're talking about right there, I think, is like a physiological change.
Maybe or no. I mean, maybe, but it's. I don't think so. I think it was an awareness change, because a lot changed in my life, like in how I see things. Like if I was watching a movie where the kid got lost or killed, I had some empathy there, right? Like I was like, oh, that sucks, but I didn't get it.
Yeah.
Right. Like now I get it. Now I'm much more emotional, much more like engaged at these types of things that happen in stories that I hear.
So not to dwell on this too much, I think we could probably move on after this, but like, do you think it's purely a perspective thing? Do you think there's anything biological? Because I know, like, for example, that women go through brain changes, right? Like during the pregnancy at 6 months, their brain has actually shrunk and is doing a whole bunch of rewiring, and then it kind of expands back out again.
So I guess let me say it this way. I don't think it's biological in that I now value children more or anything like that. I don't think it's that type of biological. If it was a biological change, to me, it was a biological change that allowed me to understand what it was to love somebody more than yourself. So prior to having kids, I love my wife more than anything other than myself, right? Like, I would put myself. I've had this conversation with. We had lots of fights about this, but
because you could not bring it up, I'm sure.
It was directly asked.
Was it?
At a very poor time and very poor situation. There's alcohol involved in things, but anyway. So I want to clarify real quick. I would 100% put myself at risk to save her life.
Yep.
Okay, that isn't the point, right?
Yep.
But if it was 100, it was no other thing. One of you die, you choose which one. Before having kids, I would have chosen that I live. Right. Some people are different, but for me, that's how I was. Right. If it was a 1% chance that I had to run into a burning building and there was a 1% chance that I could save her, I would have done that. Right. I'm not saying I wouldn't risk my life or that I didn't love her. But if it was black and white, one or the other, right, I would have chose myself. So
maybe you're more honest than the rest of us. Who knows? So
now that I have a kid, that isn't the case. I would kill myself 10 times over to let my kids live.
Wow.
Right. Like, and it changed overnight. So my understanding of what love is, or what it is to truly love somebody more than myself, may have been, a biological change. Amanda, that's a great question. I would
read it out loud.
Okay, Amanda asks, what about if your wife was in danger of dying during pregnancy? So I'll change that question to fit a little bit because, like I said, if she was just in danger of dying, I would 100% risk myself to save her.
Right.
If it was a guaranteed black or white, let's say we were in a chair and somebody had a gun to our heads, and she was pregnant, I probably would have chose for her to live even before she gave birth, just from the logical standpoint of it's 2 lives versus 1. And I'm a very, very logical person. And it's 2 lives that I care about. But until I held my son for the first time, I don't think I had that change of love. I didn't have that. Like right. I wasn't
first pregnancy.
Yeah, I wasn't really. I mean, I was upset, but nowhere near the level that my wife was upset about the miscarriages, as example, right?
Right.
And I think now I would be much more upset if we had another miscarriage. But at the time, I didn't understand what that love was. So, yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Good question. Thanks, everybody.
We got deep. This is the Left, Right, and Deep show. That's what this is. Talk about our feelings. But anyway.
All feelings are valid here.
To close out on this point, I think, it's an interesting take that, one, I respect him for coming out and saying that.
Me too. I was gonna point that out.
Right. Yeah. I wish that was more allowed in our society, right? To change opinions.
Look, but we don't allow it in ourselves either, right? And I think it's the fact that we don't trust our opponents enough, where we think that they're going to play dirty when we're down, so we play dirty when they're down. I don't even know if that's what Brian Stelter's doing. Like, he didn't say anything. He just quoted him and put it out. And they are opponents, so to speak. So maybe it's implied that he's dissing him. But I almost don't even see it that way. I don't know.
He probably is, but I'm actually looking at it in the way of like, we need more of this. We need more of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, and I got to say, especially from Jesse. I don't watch very much Fox News, but when I do, there's a couple really smug people. Let's say it that way. There's a couple really smug, arrogant people, and Jesse Waters is one of them. He's very well informed, but he's very smug. He's very arrogant, and he has very little room for dissent. So I'm glad to see this coming from him. I'm surprised. It's a good thing, and it's something that we should foster whenever we see it on the other side. Yeah.
I want to close this out by commenting on chat again. So Daniel said he cries in certain movies now because he has kids. Not that he's as emotional or whatever, but I'm the same way, dude. Like, movies and stuff that never used to bother me hit me hard. You want to hit me the hardest that I didn't expect? And
Taken by Liam Neeson.
No, is rewatching with my son, Lion King. When Simba, not Simba, when his dad, when Mufasa dies. Mufasa.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and then Scar was the uncle. Okay, all right, I'm good.
So when Mufasa dies, and my son looks over at me and says, "What happened? Where's his daddy? What happened? His daddy's hurt." I'm like, it broke me, dude. Like, I was,
oh my god.
It was like he didn't under. He's like, I was like, yeah, his dad's gone. He's not coming back, and he's like, what's he gonna do without his dad? He needs his dad.
Oh,
and they're like, oh my god, dude, it was it was rough. My wife now fast forwards through that scene. He doesn't get the watch.
It's so important.
I don't fast forward through it, but she does.
No, anyway. That's the good hurt. That's the good hurt. All right, let me throw this up here. I love this one too. There's this sort of tenet that I've I don't know if I've brought it up on the show before, but this thing that I've been thinking about, and this is like a way that you should operate in the political sphere, or like in any sphere, right? But especially in this oppositional political sphere, right? Pay attention to your emotions when you hear about something bad that your opponents are doing, right? And then pay attention when you find out that your opponents aren't as bad as you thought they were. The emotions there should be, when you find out that your opponents are doing something bad that you don't like, the emotion should be a negative one, right? It should be that, something bad is happening. And then likewise, when you find out that your opponents aren't successful in doing the bad thing or aren't what you think they are, you should have a positive emotion like, oh, there aren't as many bad people as I thought there were, right? And so, you can take that and apply it to this story that I saw right here, which I just absolutely love. So, White Lives Matter rallies flop as hardly anyone shows up, right? And so, for people who aren't too familiar with the terminology, White Lives Matter is probably, it's not necessarily neo-Nazi, but this was generally pushed by neo-Nazis. But the concept should technically be just the antidote to Black Lives Matter, where it's like, well, we just think you're wrong. But it's not like all lives matter. So anyways, whatever. So this was generally accepted to be a white supremacist, white nationalist, kind of a neo-Nazi movement. And nobody showed up, right? And so the point that I was saying before, which is that when you find out that you either don't have as many opponents as you thought, or there weren't, you don't, the bad people aren't as successful as you think they are, they're not as coordinated as you think they are, you should have a positive emotion, right? It's like, well, it turns out the white supremacists don't have their shit together. There's 2 of them. They're not a force in America. Nobody gives a shit about them, and nobody shows up to their stupid rallies, right? This should be a good thing, right? So when this happens, most people will just make fun of them. It's like, haha, stupid neo-Nazis. Great. Yeah, agreed. I'm right there with you. Also, there's none of them. You know what I'm saying? Pay attention. This is a good thing.
Yeah. I wonder how it can be interpreted in different ways, though. It's obviously not acceptable to be at that rally in a social way, right? In our social environment.
Yep.
So even if you support it or think that it should be fine that it's there or anything like that, you may not go, right? You're less likely to go.
Sure, yeah.
But I generally do agree with you that it should be looked at as that's a good thing. That's how I looked at it when I saw those come up. I was like, good.
Right. Yeah. It's well, there's another good thing that crossed my feed today, and I feel like I just want to hammer this home a little bit more. I just feel like people on the left, or maybe the center left, or I'm not even talking far left. I'm just talking about liberals and Democrats, and I'm not just actually uniquely accusing them. I'm sure that the same exact flip thing happens on the right. When we see a Black Lives Matter riot that doesn't riot, a march that doesn't riot, we should just be like, oh, good, right? There's less bad people in the world than I thought. Or there's less, angry people in the world than I thought. That should be a good thing, right? Now it's the same thing. It's this is it's not as bad as you think, and this should elicit positive emotion. And I think it doesn't elicit that positive emotion because a lot of us stake our personalities, we stake our life narratives on the fact that we have somebody that we're opposed to, right? If there's a white supremacist movement sweeping through the nation, we get serotonin from joining the movement that's opposing them. And then if you find out that movement is full of
serotonin.
Yes. Yeah, serotonin. Hey, that's what you need, man. I think that's pretty much what heroin takes the place of. But anyways,
heroin.
Stop it, Timothy. I'm not saying this is child friendly because, by the way, this is not child friendly. This is your notification now. We're actually going to be playing some fairly disturbing footage later. So, no kids, please.
So, I had 2 thoughts on that you're talking about because I interrupted you and now I probably broke your train. So sorry about that.
No, it's fine. Yeah, and probably won't ever get back. It's your
fault. Gone. Train has left the station. One, I am really glad that me not knowing that these were going to be happening didn't result in me walking down the street next to one because the way
yeah, look at that head right there. Look at
the way I people would have. I might have been all over CNN and everywhere. One guy shows up to the white supremacist rally. I'm like, no, dude, I was literally getting a coffee. I didn't know. They wouldn't believe me.
White supremacist gets a coffee.
Yeah. Starbucks is now patroned by. And the other thing is, I think, in my opinion, based on people I know, in my family, in my circles, and whatever, these people don't think that they're white, that they're racist at all, but they are. Some people are that way, and so I think when you're like, hey, we're having a rally, racists come on out. They're like, I ain't going to that. I'm not racist.
Well, they didn't.
Right?
Yeah, but that's the thing, though. They didn't frame it as from what I understand, it was just a White Lives Matter rally.
I know, but even I think generally people understood that if you were there, you would feel that way. Like people would. Feel that
Well,
way.
yeah, probably. But like if you think about Charlottesville, I think what was that 2018? Maybe it might have been a little bit earlier. Might have been 2016. Anyways, Charlottesville rally. That was called the Unite the Right rally, right? Where they kind of used a little bit of propaganda, but still, even then, Republicans didn't show up. It was white supremacists knew that it was a white supremacist thing, and the white supremacists showed up, right? So I think to your notion that, they think it's generally not acceptable to be out there, like they've known that for like 70 years in this country now. So they have come out to things before, and I think that if they were there and they were fired up, I'm not saying that they don't exist, because God, I know they do exist. I've actually listened to a bunch of them, but they're not a force. They're not. The worst thing that you're going to encounter is a Republican who supports things that you consider racist, but has other reasons for supporting them. Like, that's it. That's as bad as it gets in this country.
I don't know about that, but yeah, probably the
generally
majority.
Speaking. Look again. I mean, I could spend all day throwing out disclaimers. There are obviously white supremacists.
Can you think of a time in your life as a white male this should never happen to you?
Yes, right? I have been white and male
my whole life. Oh, okay. Where you were, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? treated because treated not necessarily racially, but you were discriminated against because of who you are or what you are. That's the word I was looking for. I couldn't get discriminated out.
Yes.
Do you wish to talk about it? I'm curious. I'm curious what your example is.
No, I will. It's actually kind of funny. I'm mostly joking, actually. There was.
I have been, and I'm not joking. So I'll tell you it next.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all of my interactions. Because all right. So I used to work with some black people at a summer camp. They never did anything bad to me. It was most of it was just funny ribbing. I think the one most serious thing, which again is not very serious, was I was in boot camp, and I was just it was kind of like after hours, the lights are off, and everybody was kind of like either like in their bunks or like just milling around doing stuff. And I just kind of like milled over to one group, and it just happened to be a group of like 3 black people, and they're like, "Hey man, what you doing just rolling up like that? What are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, it's just like some white kid, like, oh, sorry about that, sir. Let me just get the fuck out of here." Yeah. I honestly, to answer your question seriously, I mean, no, not really. I've never been discriminated against.
To disclaimer, because we, that's the society we're living in now. Disclaimer society. I know you're not equating any discrimination you ever got to what other people may receive, right? And I'm not doing the same. Right. So in my example, I'm not saying that my discrimination is equal to what anybody else has ever had to deal with. This is the worst case that I've ever had to deal with myself. And it was actually in Germany. I was out with a bunch of friends. We'd been drinking.
Yeah.
We were trying to go into a club, and they would not let me in. They said that they said that I was too drunk and they wouldn't let me in, but that wasn't true. And they ended up telling one of my German friends that I was there with that wasn't actually the case. The case was that I was a 6'3", 270-pound bald guy. That my look in their culture, because I'm from America, I didn't dress like the Germans. I look like a neo-Nazi to them.
Yeah, to be fair, back then you had like a swastika that kind of like went up, like right up here.
Not true, chat. That's not true.
Right. I mean, it was a misunderstanding.
They used to call me Harry Potter. No. So they wouldn't let me in, and man, I got irate. I was getting pissed. But they were like, all your friends can go in, but you can't. Right. And I'm like, I was getting pissed. And they ended up telling my one friend, like, they're like, dude, if he was that side, they're like, we don't know how many of us it would take to deal with him in there. We just don't want to deal with it. He's not allowed to go in. Right.
Jesus.
Like, and dude, I was irate. I was ready to throw down. I was so mad.
Yeah. You don't expect that.
And I had a few drinks in me. I wasn't drunk, but I had a few drinks in me. So, I mean, it probably helped me get mad quickly. And my friends were like, I had like 4 or 5 guys with me. They just were all like, dude, it's no big deal. We'll just go to the other bar. Like, no big deal. And I was like, no, this is fucking bullshit. So for something as minor as that, as bad as that hit me, right? Like, I really have so much empathy for people that deal with discrimination on a higher scale day in and day out, right? I got pricked with a fucking needle and I was ready to go to war. I couldn't imagine dealing like what it would take in your soul to deal with like true discrimination on a daily basis, like how much self-control those people have, because I would lose it. I would go off. And that could be part of the quote unquote white privilege or whatever, right? Like I've never had to deal with it, so I don't know how to deal with it, maybe, right? Like that kind of thing.
Well,
like, I don't know how to bite my tongue.
I wouldn't necessarily call that a privilege. It's in the sense.
I just meant like I just used the word.
Right. The white quote unquote white experience where you're not insulated to being judged on your characteristics. Although to be fair, like that's you can just I think in a man, I'm not really I'm going to try to devil's advocate here, but I trust me, my soul is really not in this. I'm just going to point something out. There's a difference between the discrimination that you experienced and a racial discrimination, right? Whatever color it is, right? So it's like what you experienced I'm
sure if I was black, I wouldn't have had that.
Well, correct. Obviously, your skin color was a prerequisite, but it wasn't the thing that they were doing, right? It was what you were getting mad because it was a misunderstanding about the ideology that you were, right? And when somebody's racist, like it stings and it's bad, but you can just assume that person's dumb as shit, right? That's what I would do. I don't know. Again, there's my white privilege showing.
Yeah. I mean, I know what I think I know what you're trying to say.
I only just half-assed it because I can't not.
Apparently, this episode is Tim's life stories. So,
yeah, and at the end of it, you're going to be a baby because we're going backwards.
I thought this one was interesting. I didn't look up. Usually, when I see a post or something, I go and look all the data up.
Talking about the Panama Papers.
But I didn't do any research on this, so I don't know for sure that it's legit. But it says, for those listening, U.S. companies have over $2 trillion in offshore havens. People don't get to just magically avoid taxes while to hoard huge corporations. Close the loopholes to ensure companies actually pay what they legally owe. Can't believe that's so difficult and controversial. What are your thoughts?
My thought is that as usual, the populist message on this, which I call, the left is populist and the right is populist too. So, but the populist left message on this, actually the populist right too. This is just a populist message. Is that there's loopholes that that sort of just exist, and a loophole is something that a corporation can just sneakily sneak through, right? And the thing is that from what I understand, it's never that simple. It's not just like if you file your taxes on the third day of the fourth month in the year of the octopus, that the IRS agents all go to sleep at this particular. It's not like something stupid like that, but it's usually like, oh, they didn't pay taxes because they just gave $2 million to charity. It's like, okay, they still paid $2 million, right? Or they didn't pay taxes this year because they lost revenue, right? And that's a way to keep companies afloat, right? You can disagree with that. Maybe you can change that, right? And so it turns out that from what I know in my limited knowledge, most of these things turn out to be something that was put in to safeguard businesses, and it's like, change the law if you don't like it, sure, but like know what you're changing. Don't just say they paid zero in taxes and
I think that's a fair point. So especially in my line of business, but because I work in the financial field now, but even prior to that, I've generally been pretty educated on these types of things. I wonder how many people don't realize that. I've never thought of that before until just now.
I never thought about it until.
Yeah, do people actually read the headline and think, "Oh, fucking Amazon is just skirting their taxes"? Like,
yeah, I mean, that's
Amazon is using,
isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I don't know. Yeah, like, do people actually think that? Anyone in chat, did you ever, like, anytime you saw the headlines that said Amazon paid zero in taxes or for whatever, did you think, oh, they're doing something illegal to not pay those taxes, or did you think that they are,
right, or it's like some
are they abusing the tax code,
corruption between them and the government or something like that? It's like,
yeah, or are they just abusing the tax code or whatever in a way that most benefits them? And yeah, okay, that sucks.
Of course they do.
Doing it, but You do the same, right? You take deductions that are allowed to you when you file your taxes at the end of the year. So,
like what if I yelled at you? Because everybody gets a tax, deduction, right? So what if I yelled at you for, trying to? I was going to say, yeah.
But to be fair, some of the corporate deductions are pretty fucking ridiculous. So,
look, to be fair, I'm probably going to agree with you, right? And let's change that law. But you can't just be stupid and just say, loopholes. It's like saying the gun show loopholes. Like you clearly don't know what you're talking about.
That I don't know if that's a fair thing to say loophole, but it's a pretty shitty thing that needs to go away if you're looking to track firearms. Like that's a huge way to just get past
most gun.
But yeah, so most of the time when they're doing that, just to close this off, because we said there's loopholes, most of them are depreciation of assets. So when you invest in your company, if you buy something that is going to help your business make money, that is an asset that loses value. So think of like a car. You buy a car to let people drive around, or a laptop, or anything, right? Most of those things lose value over time. You can depreciate those items. So basically get a tax deduction on those items for the amount of value that they lose inside your business. And that's one big way people do it. And then the other way is
that's a lot of shiny new vans Amazon has.
Depreciating. Exactly. Yeah. And so another way they do it is when you take losses, a business loss. So revenue, you don't actually profit. You don't have to pay taxes. So if you spent more money to make the money that you made than you earned, you don't have to pay taxes. You only pay taxes on the profit in a business. So what these companies do is they find ways to make their expenses high that allows them to invest in their company to grow more and more in the future. And this is what Amazon has generally been doing. They take all that money, they reinvest it in new infrastructure and new things, so they never had to pay taxes on it. And so they're growing quickly. The company is able to grow faster that way, but they never
just made a case to lower corporate taxes, Tim.
No. Mm-mm.
Oh, maybe even lower.
I'm actually torn on corporate taxes because we're going to go in some vortex deep holes here.
Oh God, no, we can't. I'm just going to let you say your thing and then not say anything because we will go down this rabbit hole.
Corporate taxes. So if you think of big corporations, like any public company, anything like that, there's some corporations that don't apply this way, but any of the big ones you've ever heard of, generally will hit this. The income is kind of in a way doubly taxed because it's taxed on the corporation itself as an entity making the money. And then the shareholders are taxed on their earnings on their shares of the company as well. So that money can get doubly taxed that way. And so it's a little questionable on how you want to do that. But no more vortex. Let's move on.
Yep. That's it. Not saying anything about that. Okay. All right. I had something about them wanting to, again, they're trying to fire Tucker Carlson because they say that something he said was white supremacist. What's new? He's not a white supremacist. It's not even close. Stop it.
He's been going, and I'm not talking about racism or supremacy, but he has been going down the rabbit hole a bit lately. Like
he always does that. He's a rabbit hole person.
He's gotten worse. I feel like he's gotten worse. I think he's trying to take over for Trump.
Worse than when Trump was in?
Yeah, when Trump was in, he was just basically like, there's nothing wrong with our president. Like,
no, he was not. Tucker Carlson is probably the most critical Fox News host of President Trump.
All right.
I'm just saying. That's all I'm saying. That's it.
Show me the bar charts.
All right. Yeah, sure. Okay. So we started late. It's 9:30 now. Let's do. Let's roll in. So we have these three big topics to get to. I think we can hit. Let's hit the Chauvin trial first now, and then we can roll into Nazario, and then we'll do the Duante Wright shooting. Okay. So let's start with Derek Chauvin. You good with that?
Yeah, it's fine. I think we're doing it in the path of longest to medium to shortest conversation.
Oh, you think so?
I do. Yeah.
I actually tried to structure it the other way. All right, let's see what you have to say.
time it.
Yeah. Somebody chat, time it. Let's time it. Okay, starting now. So we're gonna do Chauvin here. So, okay, so Derek Chauvin trial. So meta. So the prosecution has been going for the last couple of weeks. They have been presenting people. They have been calling witnesses. They've been asking the witnesses questions that are designed to paint the picture that George Floyd is dead because of Derek Chauvin's knee on his neck, right? So, but for Derek Chauvin, George Floyd would still be alive, right? And the burden is on the prosecution to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Derek Chauvin is either guilty of murder in the second degree, manslaughter in the second degree, or manslaughter in the third degree, I believe, right? So that's what we've been hearing for the last couple of weeks. Now it's time for the counterpunch. So it's the defense's turn to call witnesses that they choose and to ask them the questions that are going to make it just blow holes in the theory, right? That's at least, what they would like to do. So I'm curious, Tim, how do you think it's going for the defense? How much have you seen of it? And then how do you think it's going?
So of the defense's witnesses, I've seen some of one, basically. So,
right.
But I think they just started yesterday, right? Or today?
Yeah, and I don't even know if it was all the way.
So there hasn't been that many yet, but the one I saw was, see if I have it handy. What the doctor there? They had the pathologist. But anyway, I saw some of what his testimony where he was basically testifying that he felt that it was a cardiac arrest issue on why Chauvin died, that it wasn't
oh, I got you. Okay, so he
was solely from the knee or anything like that. Like he was saying, like it was the guy's heart failed, basically.
So was that yesterday or today? Because I didn't watch yesterday, all of it. I watched today.
I want to say that was yesterday, but I'm not sure.
Okay, so I have one of the pathologists one of the pathologists. I have a clip. I'm going to go ahead and show this.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, it was this guy. Okay, so this guy was today, I believe. Actually.
Okay.
So we'll get to yesterday. Then we'll do this one first, right? So this was somebody who they were interviewing to. I guess he did a review on the autopsy, I believe, right? So his job was to determine the cause of death. And I actually felt like I didn't want to start here, but I felt like this was a game changer for the defense, right? So up till now, the prosecution has painted a pretty clear picture that Derek Chauvin is guilty of at least manslaughter, right? They're saying that all the evidence points to that George Floyd died of asphyxia. They're pointing to it was obviously the knee, and they're pointing to something that still hasn't been rectified, which is that Derek Chauvin knew that George Floyd didn't have a pulse, and he didn't move for the last 3 minutes, right? So that one has not been addressed yet. But what this witness testified to, and what I'm about to play a little bit of, is that he testified that no, I don't believe that George Floyd died from asphyxiation. I believe he died from a heart attack. In concert with a whole bunch of other factors, including hypertension and a whole bunch of other stuff. So let me just play a little bit of this.
And let
me know if you can hear that.
Without warning, they'll have a sudden surge.
Yeah, echoey.
So they're cyclical, which sometimes makes it difficult to diagnose them. You have to do specific kind of testing to diagnose them to get around the cyclical activity.
So, just kind of in conclusion, Doctor, did you form ultimately opinions as to the cause and manner of death of Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
And what would those conclusions be?
Mr. Floyd died of a cardiac arrhythmia due to hypertensive atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease.
Okay, so layman's term, he died of a heart attack due to heart disease. Okay? And then he continues.
During the restraint.
And were there contributing causes?
Yes.
What are those?
The substances, the fentanyl and the methamphetamine, the potential of a carbon monoxide role, and the potential that the paraganglionoma was adding adrenaline to this whole mixture, making things even worse.
Okay, so the three things that he just said was the fentanyl and meth, and then the potential carbon monoxide from the exhaust pipe that was next to his face, and then there's a tumor that they found in his lower abdomen that had the potential to be adding adrenaline to his system. And basically what he did all day, and I'm not going to belabor this point too much, what his testimony showed is that George Floyd had several unique factors that are designed, that just happened to coalesce on the fact that they reduced the amount of they reduced the amount of oxygen coming into George Floyd's heart, and George Floyd had heart disease, right? And so his contention is that, for example, meth, I believe it constricts your veins. It slows down blood flow. Fentanyl slows down your breathing. The carbon monoxide takes the place of oxygen in your blood. And then he said the tumor injects adrenaline into your system. Adrenaline also constricts your blood vessels, plus the adrenaline that George Floyd was on because he was fighting with the cops. All of these things came together, and that essentially gave him a heart attack on the ground. And then he talked about some of the reasons why, if you watch the video, why he thinks that was a heart attack and not a choking, right? And he also talked about studies that said that the knee and the neck back here does not compress the airway, including the pressure on the back. Studies have shown, so he went through just about everything, and this was probably the most solid defense testimony in Derek Chauvin's favor.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the first ones. Like I said, they've only been doing it for a day or two.
Right.
And, I think that it does bring a little bit of doubt to the side of, was Derek Chauvin responsible for his death? But I don't, in my opinion, at least at this point, like if I was sitting on the jury from what I've seen so far, which isn't everything, right? I've seen a lot of it, but not everything. I still feel like there has been much more evidence, which there should have been, because it's been prosecution so far heavy, showing that Chauvin was very strongly responsible. And this person's testimony also doesn't get rid of that. Had he not been held down next to a tailpipe, right? He adds that as a factor. He also, to your description, had he not been held down and his oxygen limited, even though that may not be deadly to most people, it ended up being deadly to him. And so I think the point that's important to remember, at least to me, I think what the prosecution has to prove is that Derek Chauvin did one of two things. Either was, doing something illegal, or knowingly, putting his life at risk, right? Depending on which charge you're trying to get to. And then the second thing they have to do is that his actions were at least significantly, I don't know if I want to say the word partially, because then that I think it's there's some flexibility in there, and like how much of his actions resulted in this guy's death. Or like if I shoot a guy in the leg that normally wouldn't kill somebody, but that guy had a blood issue where his blood doesn't and he dies, I'm still responsible for that murder, even though he had
to a lesser degree, right? Because a reasonable officer, first of all, you're not supposed to shoot in the leg, but putting that aside,
I'm not talking about being an officer or not generally, right? I'm just talking about in general. Like, it doesn't matter why the person died. Well, okay, we can kind of talk a little bit about the case that's coming up, right? Like, yeah, that's not a good example.
It's not. Like, it's all so particular when it comes down to it.
Yeah. So anyway, I think this. Let me say it this way. To step back, I think this particular witness did add some doubt, but his future testimony also adds in some additional, he fucked up. And so if you watch the cross-examine on him, they asked him, they were talking about, okay, yeah, he had a heart attack. Okay. And when was he actually dead? Well, sometime in the future. So do you think that medical intervention between the time when he stopped having a heartbeat and died, technically, which aren't the same thing, could have saved him? Yes, a lot of times it does. And, do you think that it was wrong that he didn't get that intervention? He said, yeah, I do. Right. So he basically came out and condemned them for not taking any action. And I think for people that don't follow this too much, you don't see it much in the news, which shocks me. But the cops knew that he didn't have a pulse for a long time.
Correct. Yeah. I don't think the journalists understand that that's one of the key points, right? Because I think a lot of people still think that the knee choking him was a thing that happened. And it turns out that the prosecution's not necessarily saying that. The prosecution's saying it's more the weight distributed on the back plus the knee on the neck that reduced his breathing.
Yeah. So one of we mentioned earlier we were having some technical difficulties. One of the big technical difficulty was my audio, and my ability to play video for you is not working, and we can't figure out what changed. So I had to send them to Nate.
Yep, I got it.
Nate, if you want to play the second to the last video I sent you, this is a video of Officer King's. It's spelled Kueng, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Quang. Yeah, Quang. I think it's pronounced King. At least that's what I've heard in the.
That's what they've been pronouncing this.
Yeah. So his body cam, and basically he's the one that takes the pulse. And in this clip, I have it timestamped to a couple seconds before he does it. You can hear the other officer, Officer, not
Lang?
Chauvin, but Lang. Thank you. Officer Lang saying, "Hey, should we roll him over?" Like,
yep, a couple times he said that.
He does, and he also says, like, "I'm worried about excited delirium. Should we roll him over?"
Yep.
And then you can see in this one, Officer King checks his pulse and tells Chauvin that he doesn't have one. He can't find a pulse.
Yeah, right? You can actually see it already down in this lower left-hand corner. It looks like he's grabbing for a pulse.
No, not yet. He does it on the right. No.
All right, let's see. Tell me when to stop.
Yeah. Okay.
Come over here.
Up on the sidewalk.
Yeah, we need you to keep some distance. Yeah, there, let's come up.
He's not responsive right now. He's not responsive right now. He's not responsive right now.
So there's the roll him on the side comment.
No, bro, look at him. He's not responsive right now, bro.
And you can see King actually respond to the crowd saying, "Check for a pulse," because that's what they've been yelling. So here he goes. He checked.
Check his pulse.
There he's checking the pulse.
Check his pulse,
I can't find one, is what he said there. If you didn't hear it. And then you can stop it there. And then Chauvin says, "Can't find what? What's going on?" He goes, "I can't find a pulse." If you pull up the next one, the second video I sent you from that same video.
Yep.
We don't actually need to play it, but I have it set at the timestamp of when Chauvin actually gets up off of Floyd, and it is almost 3 minutes later. So he literally, after knowing that he didn't have a pulse, kneeled on his neck for 3 more minutes.
2047. 1812. So 2.5 minutes.
All right, it's it's almost.
We might have some technical difficulties. I'm sorry about that, but
the
timestamp is 2.5 minutes.
There,
so after learn, and that to me is probably, when it comes down to it, if you've been watching most of these, that is probably the biggest sticking point. Is that Derek Chauvin knew, and we know he knew that there was no pulse, and yet he didn't move. And the question is going to be, why didn't he move? And is that justifiable, right? Does that display, malice or intent?
Yeah,
but I think
it doesn't help him that both other officers, right? The one officer checks the pulse, tells him, He doesn't say much else, but he at least does that. And then Officer Lane multiple times like, "Hey, we should roll him over. Hey, we should roll him over."
Yep.
Right?
Looks bad. And the crowd's saying it too. What are you doing? What are you doing to him? He can't breathe. Get off him. Right? Everybody's kind of like narrating the worst case scenario in front of Chauvin. Right? Regardless of what's actually happening, it sounds horrible. Right? And then, obviously some of it is happening.
Yeah. So I think, and that's the point that really stuck to me from the other doctor is, if as a juror I said, okay, I have reasonable doubt that Chauvin was the pure cause of his death. Now, at what level do you hold the officer responsible for preventing medical care? Because he's the head officer on the scene, and the other officer's like, hey, we need to roll him over. Hey, he doesn't have a pulse.
Yep.
And guy in charge says, keep him where he's at. Right? Yep. So where does he? Well, he just says no. He just says okay. No, he doesn't actually say.
So listen. So it gets very complicated, right? So number one, you're completely right about everything you just said, right? But there's
as usual,
right? But it's lacking context as usual, right? Because we weren't there. I mean, there was like a million things going on, right? The crowd was getting unruly. EMS was on the way. As the use of force expert testified yesterday, I guess we can talk about him just a little bit. As he testified, this hold was in some capacities was reasonable, right? The entire thing, right? Because if he thought that he just passed out, that was a reasonable thing. Okay, so now you're going to say that he was told about the pulse. That's correct.
No. Which use of force expert? There was
there was
a
use of force expert that the defense called yesterday.
Okay, I haven't seen that one.
Yeah. So, and I'll just tell you about him a little bit, and there's actually no reason to disagree with me, because I'm not gonna make it sound like he was Jesus, because he wasn't. So the defense called a use of force expert, and this guy is somebody who does this professionally. He offers his services. He makes some ungodly amount of money, like $350 an hour or something like that.
So he's not part of the Minneapolis police force or training squad. He's independent.
Again, they do the thing for a half an hour before they get going where they talk about his credentials. He's highly, highly credentialed. He's nationally recognized. He teaches this. He lives and breathes this stuff. Okay. So he has credentials on this. That being said, there was two big problems with him. It should have been like a left from this guy and then a right from the medical guy, and then there's massive reasonable doubt. Unfortunately, with this guy, there was two big problems with him. So the first big problem is that he was very obviously biased in Chauvin's favor, like biased. And I don't just mean like he believed Chauvin was in the right, so he, happened to testify that way. No, he was obviously biased because he just said yes to all of the defense questions, and then he hedged every single question that the prosecutor sent at him. So he very obviously wasn't a fair, neutral, impartial third party that just happened to be there and know about this. Like, it was very obvious that he had an outcome that he was edging towards. And a lot of the witnesses that were called were like that. I remember early on, I think the woman from the fire department, she was very obviously biased, but she was a witness, as in like a visual witness. This person's supposed to be an expert use of force, very calm, controlled, very professional person. So that didn't work out very well in his favor. And the other thing is he was underutilized as far as questions go. So the questions he was initially asked by the defense were decent, right? It was like, okay, how do you review use of force? How did you classify this event, and what did you think, right? And basically he was like, well, this is how I classify it. I look for these three different criteria. I saw them all present here. I believe that his use of force was justifiable. And he did have some valuable things to say. I recommend people go and watch at least the first part of the testimony, because you need to know what was said. However, on the cross-examination, he just got sucker punched real hard, because he overextended in ways that he did not need to, and the prosecution rightly jumped on it, and they hit him on so many things. Like in cross-examination, he said George Floyd, a normal non-resisting person would be laying comfortably on the concrete, and that the prosecution is like, did you just say laying comfortably? Like, it was just an optics failure. And then when he was re-examined by the defense, they they didn't ask the right questions to counter it. So he should have been a slam dunk, but he was useless in the end, I think. So that was day one. This is day two, though. I think this medical testimony drives a bus through the no reasonable doubt standard. I think at this point you can reasonably doubt that Derek Chauvin killed the man. Yeah, it doesn't mean that you can doubt yet. I don't know what they're going to do with this, but it seems still pretty obvious that Derek Chauvin knew that George Floyd didn't have a pulse for the last 3 minutes and didn't do anything about it. So the defense is going to have to rectify that issue in the next day or so.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough one, but that I don't know how that plays into the charges, So
I don't either. So there was another question I had, and then we can move on unless you have something else. But there was a question where if it turns out that regardless of how negligent he was at the end, if it turns out that George Floyd died of a heart attack, which is not something that is asphyxia caused by him being on the back, can you charge him with any of this anymore? Like if he's not actually responsible for the death, if George Floyd had a heart attack, can you actually charge him with any of this? And I don't actually know that. I was going to pull up the statutes, but ran out of time.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's been a lot of things that have optics but don't necessarily have a lot of teeth.
Yep.
Like one of them is one of the ones that you hear a lot is one of the medical examiners said, if I would have found him in his apartment with no other signs or information like this, then I would have said he died of a drug overdose or something, right? Like, and that has an emotional impact. But if you take that statement and you shift it a little bit, and you said, "Hey, if I found somebody lying dead in their bed with no other signs of reason for death, I would just say they died of natural causes." Well, that could also be that somebody smothered them with a pillow, right? Just because you don't have all the information doesn't mean that you're going to give the correct reason for death. And so I think that's that statement of saying, well, if I knew nothing else, then I would say he died.
It's not as useful. It's not as useful as you think in the context of this, but it is I think it was more a statement of how much drugs were in his system. It's like
I agree, and he had a lot, right? I mean, I think for a person that has never taken fentanyl or anything, it's like what three whatever grams. I forget which one it was in your system that can be deadly, and he had like 11. But they have had testimony to come out and say like that is not uncommon in drug addicts. Like you see
especially chronic users. Right?
Yeah. That's what I mean. So like it's not that isn't a fatal level for somebody that takes it all the time, which isn't to say that's a good thing. It just is what it is. The one other thing that I wanted to talk about was I forget the doctor's name. See if it's on the screen anywhere here. Dr. Martin Tobin. He had a pretty interesting. He was one of the doctors called by the prosecution, and he had an interesting testimony. I didn't get to watch all of it. He was also a bit biased. I mean, when he was talking about how Chauvin was kneeling on him, he said his knee was rammed into the ribs. Yeah, like that definitely has.
Not happy.
It definitely has a visual and negative I mean, he could have easily said his knee was pressed into, right? And that has a more
professional terms for everything he said.
So yeah, I mean, like I feel like he also had some bias there. But one of the things he was talking about that I thought was really interesting and goes along with what I've read about fentanyl and methamphetamines is he was talking about the respiratory rate. And right before George Floyd stops breathing, he was counting his breaths. And they said he had I want to say it was a 17 breaths a second or 20 breaths a second.
20.
I forget.
Either 20 or 22.
Yeah. Respiratory rate, which is, right in the range of normal, and that you would expect to see it down somewhere in the range of like 7 if you were having a fentanyl or a depressant, reaction. Now, with that said, he had both meth and fentanyl in his system. And they're now not saying, "Oh, it was the drugs." They're now saying, "Oh, it's the heart."
With contributions, let me just talk about that real quick. So the breaths. So this doctor that testified today actually talked about that. When he got cross-examined, he was asked about it. You didn't see that?
I didn't see that part.
No, yeah. So the cross examination, the first round, they asked him about that. They said, "Well, would you not expect somebody on fentanyl or meth to have their breathing lower than 22?" And what he actually responded with, which was pretty intelligent, which was, "This guy is claiming to be short of breath, and he just got done fighting with cops. His breathing rate should be at about 30. The fact that it's at 22 means that it is depressed, right? Which makes sense, right? You just got done fighting with the cops. When either you think you're suffocating or you are suffocating, you increase your breathing rate to compensate. And so 20 or 22 is the normal rate, but he shouldn't be breathing at the normal rate. He should be up around 30.
Trying to think, like I'm trying to like imagine when I'm exercising or short of breath, like do I breathe faster? I don't know if I breathe faster necessarily or just deeper, but I guess if I can't breathe deeper because of restrictions or something, maybe I would breathe faster. Like,
Well, hey,
I don't know.
That was
I'm
that
not
was
this anecdotal. I'm not a doctor. I'm just thinking out loud here. Anyway, so right now my opinion is still the same. I still think from what I've seen, Chauvin will probably get charged with something, be found guilty for something.
What are you thinking? Manslaughter? Any of the murders?
I actually think murder 2 is easier for them to get to. Right? I mean, I think to prove manslaughter or murder 2, they have to prove he's responsible for the death. That to me is right now the biggest risk. Right? Would he have died anyway? Right? Like, did he have a heart attack? Was it Chauvin's fault? To me, that's the needle they're trying to poke.
Cause the death of a human being without intent to affect the death of that person or another, but without premeditation.
Right.
Or causes the death of a human being while committing
crime.
Shooting.
So I think the part of it is while committing a crime. So
yeah,
I still feel like they've done a good enough job of saying he was outside of policy, he was outside of training, he was using unreasonable excessive force, which is then a crime, right? So if he is using excessive force, which is a crime, and then causes the death, that's murder 2.
But it has to be victim on something else in order to satisfy that, and I don't know if they're going to get that manslaughter in the 3rd degree. Second degree.
No, that's murder. That's secondary murder.
I know that's what that is, right? So, but what you're saying is that he needs to be doing something illegal. That something illegal needs to be either that other second degree murder charge. Or, I'm sorry, 3rd degree murder charge, or it needs to be It needs to be one of those things you're charging with. Otherwise, you cannot say he was doing it in the course of committing a crime. So, if they can get him on murder in the 3rd degree or manslaughter in the 3rd degree.
Denny, what are you saying? You said not excessive, reasonable. I'm saying that the prosecution is saying that he had used excessive force, and therefore that is a crime. But what are you trying to say? And so, well, if he, I don't know how that works for murder 2. If you have to have previously been convicted of the crime that you were committing,
probably concurrently, right? So that's
not one of the charges, right? Wouldn't they have had to charge him with excessive force?
Correct. Is excessive force against the law, or is that like a policy violation for the department?
Yeah, I don't know how that works, actually.
Yeah, I don't know either.
So if excessive force isn't illegal, then I would say murder 2 is off the table. Denny's saying in his opinion it was reasonable force.
Ask Denny, do you think it was, and I'm curious about this, do you think it was reasonable all the way through, or do you think maybe it was gradually less reasonable as time went on, or do you think there was a point where it stopped being reasonable? What do you think? I'm curious as to what you think, right? Because it seems to me that it was reasonable for the first 6 minutes, and I come to there's so many things that go into this, but just like broadly for me, it's the fact that he was being combative for the entire time. He also said that he couldn't breathe for the first 3 minutes while he wasn't even on the ground. He kept saying he couldn't breathe in the back of the car. Cops do not listen to perps after they cry wolf the second time. Like, I really don't blame them for ignoring that. But after he was told that there was no pulse, like that's when you roll him on his side, in my view, and you start doing CPR or a recovery, whatever it is, right?
I think that's pretty shit to be like, yeah, I can keep him here until you don't have a pulse. Like there was a significant amount of time prior to that. If you watch the videos, and I've watched all 3 body cams multiple times, and I've tried to timestamp when from each body cam it looks like he's trying to get the cops off, resist, and get up. And that ends after like 30 seconds of being on the ground. After that, you can see him putting his hand on the tire to push his chest up off the ground, doing things to try and just make breathing easier, but he's not kicking his legs, he's not spinning his hips, he's not doing anything to try and fully resist. And if you look at the other 2 cops that are on him, both of them take their weight off and take a step, not a step back, but like a pull back from their hold. Right? The guy on the feet doesn't put the bola on his feet. He has it in his hand and he throws it in the car. The guy on his waist in midsection kind of backs up and is sitting on his haunches more than he is on him. But Chauvin doesn't do that.
Yeah. And look, as they've testified multiple times, just because your victim passes out doesn't mean that they're not going to come to in a second and keep trying to go. Like
he never was aggressive.
I have never seen some kind of training on this. Okay, I have in my life, and it's when you're there saying that what you did was like calling something like that unreasonable. It's like it's the privilege of the people who never have to deal with junkies. It is, right? I mean, I cannot impress upon people enough. Like you don't realize until you do this for a long period of time. But junkies will tell you absolutely anything to get out of an arrest. A
lot of people will.
I have claustrophobia. I'm choking.
I've had friends that were that way that weren't junkies. They were just fucking liars.
Right. I'm being obviously hyperbolic, but the point is that like these cops, like there is almost no way to make them not desensitized. As a matter of fact, for them to listen to George Floyd, actually, I would argue would have been stupid. Right. Now, for them not to monitor him, this is where I have issues, right? Obviously, like for them not to respond to the fact that he doesn't have a pulse, that's where I have an issue. I don't really care about all that other bullshit up until the fact that he apparently, his pulse starts or stops, right? Because I find it eminently, it doesn't look good. It looks horrible, but I think from their experience, that was probably the most reasonable thing to do.
So I adamantly disagree, and the reason I say this is, and we've had this conversation off stream, but we haven't had it on. Once he's handcuffed and in the prone position on the ground, he's of little to no threat to anybody, including himself, even in the middle of the street. This goes to Denny's comment. So Denny in chat said, "What if they let him up and he runs into traffic and causes someone to run into or over someone else?" To that point, he's handcuffed and in the prone position. I did this today just to go back and do it again, but I've done it several times in my whole thinking of this case. I've put my hands behind my back and interlocked my fingers and then gotten up off the ground. And it is a fucking process. Okay. I'm not saying it's not doable. It's not that hard.
It's a process, but let me tell you something.
You have to roll over. You have to then flip your body over, get up on your knees, and then
I guarantee George Floyd would have done that if they didn't hold him down for at least the first 3 minutes.
In any one of those steps that takes, 10 or 15 seconds to do.
Okay, but why let him start?
Hold on. A slight bump knocks you straight to the ground.
Okay, but why let him start? I'm not even asking you why you would let him start. That's not the point. The point is that they're trained to keep positive control over the individual. It doesn't matter what you think they should or shouldn't have done.
Yeah. Okay. So they're also trained.
We're going to talk about positive control in a couple minutes when we get to.
They're also trained to.
Duante.
They're also trained to release control and to release these dangerous holds when they're in control and when they're handcuffed. So that one of the things that I've heard a lot is that this particular hold is taught in training, and it is. Yep. But the distinction is it's taught in training to get somebody handcuffed. And then in the training, it specifically says once they're handcuffed, roll them on their side.
Yep.
Right. Once they're handcuffed, get them out of this position. Do not continue to kneel on them. It's in the fucking training. Not they're already handcuffed and you're laying them on the ground. Now assume this position. which is what happened.
Right, and this gets incredibly complicated. There's another move where you straight up hog tie the person, right? And you don't put them on their side there. They're straight up on their belly with all 4 of their limbs tied behind them. And
but
that's a sanctioned move.
You're not sitting on them.
Okay, okay, so I really recommend that you watch the entirety, and I'm not just we can move on after this. I really recommend that you watch the entirety of the doctor's today, his testimony, because he actually ranged the whole gambit, and it turns out that this number one, the knee. First of all, there's no evidence of how much pressure he had out in there. As a matter of fact, there's evidence that there wasn't much pressure because normally it would cause bruising. Okay, number 2,
images where his foot is up off the ground.
I understand that, right? And even then, according to him, scientifically, that means he had maybe about 30 pounds of pressure on him, right?
Or it could be 90% of his body weight.
Low. However, he used a study, right? A scientific study that showed how much weight that you can put on somebody when you're using 1 knee or 2 knees. I really recommend watching the whole thing.
Hold on. I'm telling you from physics training, like understanding how physics works, if he wanted to put pressure, if he had 1 foot, if the knee was on his neck and that foot was up off the ground, how he aligned his center of mass would determine how much pressure's on that, right? And with his center of mass in the center of his 2 legs, which it was most of the time, that would put approximately 50% of his body weight of pressure on his knee. It does work that way. I'm telling you from physics, it works that way. The doctor
I'm aware that you think it works that way. Go watch his testimony. I'm not going to relitigate the whole thing. Listen, Tim, I know you're incredulous. I understand the math that you're trying to tell me. I'm aware of what half his weight divided by 2 is. Okay, I get it.
1/4 of his weight. Actually, half his weight divided by 2 is 1/4 of his weight.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, my bad. Yeah, correct. You got me. But
anyway, we've been on this one for a while. I don't think
we have. And we would go all night with this. So I'm sorry to the audience. We just love this shit. Which is really fucked up. That's really fucked up.
At each other. So my summary is I think that he still has a high chance of being convicted. But there's a lot more to go, and let's see what happens.
I think it's going to be difficult. It's going to be there's a lot of, if you watch the whole thing, he addressed so many topics. There's a lot more reasonable doubt than there was before. I can't really say he might get manslaughter. Murder's kind of out of the question. I don't think that's going to be a thing. I don't think so.
Yeah. So let's move on to one of the other 2. Let's move on to the Wright one. Is that the one that was next?
Yeah, let's do Duante Wright.
Okay, let's do that one next, because I think that one's, if we miss the other one, we can maybe hit it next week. But it was
no one died. Severe of the events. Yeah,
I actually find it to be more telling.
You think so?
Of police these days. Yeah. But this one's an interesting case. So let's talk about it.
Yeah. So Minnesota, man. Okay, so Minnesota now, in the middle of George Floyd, the George Floyd or Derek Chauvin trial, there was another fatal shooting of a white officer and a black driver this time. Right, so there was an incident where a driver named Duante Wright was pulled over. It was a traffic stop. Allegedly, it was because he had air fresheners dangling from his mirror. And we can talk about that.
Really? I didn't know why he got pulled over.
That was allegedly it. I think there was more. I think it gets a little complicated, but there was the reason that they told him he got pulled over. And so the police officers, they pulled him out of the car because they found out he had a warrant out.
Yeah, that's important. He had a warrant, and so then they approached him with multiple officers and got him out of the car.
Yes, so they got him out of the car. They didn't bring him around to the back. By the way, I have a lot of criticisms of how all of them handled this, except for maybe the guy on the other side of the car. Both of the ones that were handling him did this very poorly. But what they did was they got him out of the car. They kept the driver's side door right next to him open. Okay, and then they were fiddling around with the handcuffs, trying to get him handcuffed. And he eventually breaks free. He breaks for the seat, and then I'll show you. I actually have the footage pulled up, so let's just watch this for a little bit. And this is CNN. I'm so sorry for subjecting you to this, but
If you play the one that I sent you, it's timestamped at when he breaks free and gets into the car.
I did not pull that one up. I'm sorry. So we have to deal with CNN.
Oh, okay.
Wright is seen stepping out of his vehicle. Police then tried to take Wright into custody after discovering he has an outstanding warrant. The video shows Wright
breaks away
to resist as cuffs are placed on him. And
Amanda, he never got in the cuffs. They were trying to get it on him.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the audio is a bit garbled. I'm going to go over that for people.
It's even more garbled because you're having the echo issue that I was having earlier too.
No, it actually sounds like that.
Well, you had it on the other videos. So yeah, you're having it too.
Yay.
Long story short, yeah. So they've got him up against the side. They're getting ready to put the cuffs on him. They say, "Hey, we're arresting you for a warrant, whatever." And he at that point decides, "Oh, fuck this, I'm out." And tries to get in the car and get away. You can see her pull out her gun, which when I first saw this video, I was like, God, what a dumbass. Like, you can't use your gun in this situation. Like, there's other cops right there. There's a lot of shit going on. Like, what are you going to do with your gun, right? I'm sitting there looking at the gun in her video cam like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And then you hear her say, stop, or I'm going to tase you. And I'm like,
yes. She said,
you're going to put your gun away and get your taser out? Like, why didn't you just get your taser out?
Right.
And then she's like, taser, and fires. And I'm like, oh, shit. Yep. And you can see her freak out. Like, when she hears that gunshot, you can see her like, what the fuck was, oh my God, I just shot somebody. And like drops the gun on the ground. You can see she drops it. She's like, what the, or maybe did she drop it or holster it? She might have holstered it.
I don't know if she dropped it. It's not in her hand though.
Yeah. Like, and she's like, oh my God, I shot him. Like, it's clear.
Yeah, she says, oh shit, I just shot him. And you can look at the expressions on their face. Yeah. They're both, look at his mouth is open. He's like, oh my fucking God.
Yeah.
So
I don't know how she didn't know that it was a gun. I don't know. Like, Amanda's asking in chat, like, how did she not know that was a gun? Like, isn't there a weight difference?
Like, question.
You know, I don't know. Like, they should be located at different places on the belt. You would imagine that, you know, she's not like a rookie. She's been in the position for a long time. Maybe she got a new belt and put weapons in different places. Like, but you still think she would have realized the gun.
To be a standard configuration. I don't have the press briefing pulled up, but the police chief testified. He said, we train. We have the taser on one side, on like the left hand side, and we have, you know, the pistol on the right hand side. Right? He says they train that standard. So how she messed it up is even more like out of like how did that happen? We don't know. Right. So let me.
Yeah, it's insane.
We can talk about the fallout in a second. I just want to go over this because I have so many problems with everything that happened here. Right. So number one, like I said before, here's the driver's side door. It's open. He's standing right next to it. Okay. That's number one. Number two, look at this weak.
The release footage.
Like, why are the cuffs not on? Why are the cuffs not on? Why are the cuffs not on? Why are the cuffs not on?
And then,
what are you doing? Get the cuffs. Like,
stepping out of his vehicle.
Okay, now watch this. Okay, so number one.
If you hear him right here, the guy's like, he's resisting a bit. You can, if you listen to the non-CNN version, the guy's like, hey, stop resisting. Let me get these on you, basically.
Yeah.
Well, but the guy's been compliant so far, right? Like, I mean, not to say that they did things perfectly, but, you know, I don't really put it on them as much for that. Like, he should have taken him farther away to the back of the car. They should have at least shut the door if they were going to leave him there.
Part of my analysis here. Right. So, again, as somebody who's had training with keeping positive control, cuffing, all this kind of stuff, like, this stuff really annoys me because this should not have happened. Right? There are several things that went wrong. Again, first thing was that the door was open and he was standing right there. The second one was that he didn't get the cuffs on fast enough. The third was when she came in to help. What the heck? Just watch her hands. What exactly is she contributing to this? Right? Just imagine that you are there to help. You are here to make sure that this suspect doesn't move until the cuffs are on. And watch what she does with her hands.
To take Wright into custody after discovering he has an outstanding warrant.
Okay, so she doesn't help. He gets in the car, and then she messes up her thing. Right, so obviously I have an issue with the fact that she doesn't know the difference between the weight of a Glock and a taser. Okay, so many things went wrong here. It was almost all the cops' fault, except for the fact that this guy fled arrest, right? So we can get to that later. But like, this was so avoidable by everybody. The cop who was cuffing, by her, by him. None of this should have happened, and yet there's riots, right? So I don't know if we want to go into that, but what did you want to say about that?
I mean, I think that I agree with you. There's mistakes made around the board. I think that, as I've said before, we need to focus more on better training and better officers.
Yep.
Not to say that these aren't good officers. I'm just saying in general, that's where we focus.
Maybe they weren't on their best today.
Mistakes are going to have, in any job, in anything, you make a mistake, right? Like the guy getting him out and putting him on the side of the car and not closing the door. That's a mistake. Not getting him cuffed really quickly. It looked like he was struggling. Like he pulled out his cuffs. You thought he had him held a certain way and he didn't. And he was looking at him like, what the fuck? Like things happen like that. That's to be expected in any job, in any day, right? With any training. I'm not saying that, he shouldn't have gotten better training or been better at what he was doing there. But, a lot of things, but that's generally how things go really bad is several things stack up that shouldn't have happened, but
that's
did.
Why they're trained not to do this. That's why they're trained to put people in the back of the car. That's why they teach positive control techniques. That's why you train putting cuffs on people.
They don't train positive control techniques so your partner doesn't mistake a taser for a gun and shoot him.
Well, they do it so that he can't flee, for sure, right?
Yeah,
they can't. Right, yeah. So, I mean, again, like all of this was just a series of cascading failures. I think the least of which was him trying to get the cuffs on. I'm sure that was difficult, but he still should have done it faster. The most egregious of which was fucking mistaking your fully loaded Glock with a taser, which is plastic and yellow.
Yeah,
okay,
I mean, it's crazy.
And now,
so let's talk about the riots and stuff. I actually think the riots are ridiculous. Like, this is terrible. The guy getting killed for this is absolutely terrible. There's no excuse for it. But it's clearly not racially driven. It's clearly not abuse of power. Like, it's none of these things that these riots are based on. This is an absolutely horrible mistake that should never have happened and did.
And she's charged with manslaughter.
Yeah,
she is charged with manslaughter.
There's no reason to be writing about this. This isn't like something that you're like, oh, this is a systemic issue that needs to be fixed. Officers are always mistaking their guns for their tasers.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like that's not this is a fucking fluke and a 1 in a million. Like how often I'm curious, how often do cops pull a taser and tase somebody a year?
I don't even know.
Like,
I don't know.
And when's the last time somebody mistook a taser for a gun? Like, it's a 1 in a million, I'm sure, event, and it should never have happened, and all that. But at the same time, like, it doesn't warrant an uproar. Not that his life isn't valuable, and I mean, don't take me the wrong way there, but there's just, I don't know. Like, I think it's just people looking for reason to get out and be angry about stuff. Like,
well, they're already there for the. They're waiting for the Chauvin trial to end. So they thought they would just go a little early, I'm sure.
They need some practice. I'd be up for I'd be more behind them freaking out over the Nazario thing. Right? Like even though he didn't get killed, like the way that he was treated. I'd be more about them coming out and protesting that.
I know we're going to differ on this one a little bit. We can get into that in a second. But I just wanted to show, I mean, I'm just going to scroll a little bit here. I'm not going to zoom in on any of these, but like this is Andy No's Twitter. I like going to him whenever there's, riots and stuff. And you can see just generally speaking, there's footage of just everything's on fire, right? And Portland's on fire as usual, but also, this was a person that was beating cops at the police station. Several of the police stations they attempted to burn down. Oh, here's some great parents having their, tiny child scream at the police. So several precincts or at least the precinct, Columbia precinct, I believe, which is where this is. They tried to burn it down. They assaulted it. They've shot at the precincts. They've been rioting, as you can see behind me. Okay, right. So that's a photo from the riots.
Oh, Mary Poppins.
Yeah. No. Well, it is. It's just not the one you were expecting. When
No,
when they pull stuff out of their bag, it's just endless Molotovs.
we're generally going to agree on this one, though. Is bullshit that it happened, should never happen. Insane that it happened. Like, what the fuck? But why are there riots? Like,
right? Nobody disagrees with you. Like,
yeah, it's clear. There's no contention here. Like, and I'd say there's a little bit, but not on the actual event. It's the police chief got fired because he said it was an accidental discharge, which it was. And then another person got fired. Another person got fired by saying that she deserves to have
due process.
Yeah,
I think he was actually fired because of the horrible hat that he had on.
So I get where the mayor's coming from. Like, he's not had an easy go of things lately, and he's probably just trying to save as much face as possible. But at the same time, like, you can't be hanging these other people that did nothing wrong.
No, that's a shitty person right there.
To just appease the crowds there, like neither the police chief nor the other person, in my opinion, did anything wrong in saying, hey, she deserves due process like anybody else. Agreed, right? We can all look at it and say, yep, she fucked up, and she agreed too. She resigned before she got charged, basically saying, yeah, look, I know I messed up. The police chief even said it was an accidental discharge. It doesn't mean that she doesn't deserve to be prosecuted or punished or anything. It's just saying this is what happened. Like, that's what it was. So yeah, like I said, I don't think there's a lot to say about this one right now, other than people are overreacting, and it's a terrible, terrible thing that happened. And how the hell do you mistake a gun for a taser?
God, you see all their expressions. Like,
maybe they're weighted similarly. I don't have a gun and a taser on my belt.
Maybe. I'm pretty sure they're like plastic or polymer or something like that. I just don't.
You gotta have a chunk of battery in there, my dude, or you wouldn't get the charge out of them.
Look. I mean, devil's advocate. When you've got adrenaline going, you do stupid shit. Yeah, that's all I'm gonna say.
Before we close out of this one, Amanda said, "Aren't people also upset about how they handled his body after the fact?" I haven't heard anything about that. I don't know. Have you?
I heard something about him laying in the street or something like that.
Oh, yeah. I'll have to look into that one. I haven't heard that one. So, I guess let's move on to Navarro, hopefully quickly, and then get out of here because we started late, but we're running late.
Yeah, we can go a little bit over here. We can't get to. I think I wanted to do for my special segment. I wanted to talk about how protesting is useless, but hey, we got more interesting things to talk about. So maybe we'll talk about that.
We can hit that one up. So, I guess I sent you a video on Navarro.
Do you have a timestamp for that?
I have several. So the first part I wanted to start from 00. I just want to show like how the cops pulled up. But before we show it, let me give the backstory. So anyway, there's tons of video. This encounter goes on for like 40 or 50 or 60, like forever, and there's body cam footage of all of it. The long and short of it is, they pulled out of I forget what store, some parking lot somewhere, to pull him over because he didn't have a tag. He has a temp tag that's hanging in the window, but you can't see it because the window's tinted. So they go to pull him over. He drives for what the policeman says is over 1.5 miles, but in actuality comes out, it's less than 1 mile based on actual data. And he pulls into this gas station to pull over. In there talking, the cops are yelling, and this is after all this is happening, but I'm just telling you this is a preamble so you understand the situation. In there talking, the cop says, I went to pull you over and you didn't stop. And he says, well, I know, but all the streets were completely dark. I didn't feel safe pulling over for you or for me pulling over in a dark area. I was trying to get to a well-lit area. I slowed down to about 5 or 10 miles an hour so that you knew that I was aware you were there and that I was going to pull over. Right.
Yep.
So he says all those things. So keeping those things in mind, watch the first couple seconds of this video and see how they react once he stops and pulls over. Again, they're pulling him over for no tag. That's all they know about him at this point.
And tell me when to stop.
You'll know. It's
Driver, roll the window down.
Gun right out for those who were listening.
That's it. That's the point, right? Is like that you can stop it at that point. That's all I was trying to show. It's like it was escalated from get go, right? They're pulling him over for no tag. and they get out of the car, draw the gun, and yell at him to get out of the car.
Yep.
Right. Like this is massively escalated from the get go. From here going forward, the partner gets out of his car, draws his gun. They continue to yell at him to get out, like to put his hands out of the window, and all of those things. They never once in any of this time tell him why he's being pulled over, what he's done, any of that. Right.
Yep.
And so it continues on. And then the next part that I thought was worth showing starts at timestamp 141 on that video.
Okay.
And I think it's important to listen to the tone in the other, not the officer that you just saw, but the other officer's voice.
The rookie is from what I'm saying.
No, the rookie is the rookie is the one you just saw. It's the not rookie.
Rookie was driving?
Both were driving. There's two police cars.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, it throughout this, I'm going to refer to the young guy's rookie because I don't know their names, and then I'm going to refer to the other guy's senior. You can definitely tell which one's which. The rookie sounds green as hell, but the older guy seems pretty senior.
Treated. Yo, what? Guess what? I'm driving too. I don't know, man. Get out of the car.
What's going on?
Get out of the car now.
What's going on?
They both have their pistols trained up.
You can turn it off there. So you probably didn't hear it. The audio is a little garbled, but long story short, he says, I'm a veteran. Why are you treating me this way? And the guy says, I'm a veteran too. They train you to obey. I'm telling you to get out of the car. Get out of the car. And he says, he's like, what's going on? What's going on? And that cop says, you're fixing to ride the lightning, son. That's what's going on. Like, Jesus Christ.
What does that even mean, bro? Like, again, I'm going
to tase him, right? Is what I'm assuming. It means he's going to tase him. But he's like, you're fixing to ride the lightning, son. That's what's going on. Like, really? Like, you're threatening to, like, come on.
Yeah, so this is the stage. It's actually, I learned this from the use of force instructor the other day. At this stage, he is in what's considered passive resistance, which means he's not pulling away from you, but he's just not doing what you're saying. No, passive resistance means
he has complied
to body.
He complied to everything up until the point where they said, get out of the car. So when they first pulled him over, they said, put your hands out. He did. Then they said, turn your car off and put your hands out. He did. He's done everything, right? He's complied to everything. And they said, get out of the car. And then he just simply says, like, look, I'm not going to get out of the car. Can you tell me what's going on? So all the way up until this point, they still have not told him why he's being pulled over or what's going on. And he's asking. And they're pointing guns at him. And he's asking. He's simply saying, hey, what's going on? He's got his hand shown. He's not being aggressive at all. He's extremely calm.
He stays calm until like they have him out and on the ground, and he's got like mace in his eyes, and like he's starting to like you can tell he's
to cry at that point, but he never gets angry or aggressive. Well, I wouldn't say never gets angry, but he never gets aggressive at all.
Right.
So, but yeah, at that point it was hard to hear. But the part I thought was ridiculous from there is he's like, "You're fixing to ride the lightning, son." Like he's simply asking, "What's going on? Why am I being pulled over?" And the officer's response is, "We're going to fucking tase you," is what's going on. All right. So the next timestamp was at 2:06. So notice this is literally 2 minutes into pulling him over. It's not like they've been standing off for 10 minutes or anything. They pulled him over. The first clip you saw, the last one started at 1 minute and 40 seconds. This is only like 20 or 30 seconds later.
All right. So just to set it up, they've choked up on the car a little bit. Now they're about 5 feet away from him. Both of them, it looks like I can see at least one of them has a firearm out. I think that's the bottom.
I think at this point, I'm not sure if at some point the senior cop puts away his firearm and pulls out the taser. I think at this point he has the taser.
Fresh, man. You think he even shaves?
No, dude. They even say so. Sidebar. The senior cop even says later when they're talking about helping the guy get the mace out of his eyes, which you'll see in a minute. They're like, "Dude, you're fresh out of rookie school. Tell him what it's like." Right? Like, I mean, it's.
So you don't need to tell him. I'm sure this guy gets sprayed regularly.
So I think the senior cop has his taser out here, which is important because he puts it like right up in his face. It's a taser, not a gun.
All right. Here goes.
We'll talk to you. Get out the car. You received an order. Obey it.
I'm honestly afraid to get out. Can I?
Yeah, get out.
What's going on?
Get out.
Okay, so
Yeah,
you can see at the top right how the officer's holding the taser, like side-handed, pointed at him.
Yeah, he definitely is.
And he went up and like grabbed the handle. So if you couldn't hear it again, the audio is garbled. They say, you need to learn to obey the order or whatever. Get out of the car. And he said that the guy says, I'm honestly afraid to get out of the car. What's going on? Again, he still doesn't know why he's been pulled over. In his mind, he didn't do anything wrong. He wasn't speeding. He had his lights on, all the shit. He doesn't know that the officers didn't see his tag. So he doesn't even know why he's been pulled over and all this is happening.
Well, he might even suspect that. He's probably this entire time trying to get them to say, it's your license plate, at which time he can say, my license, I just bought the car, it's in the back window. You know what I'm saying? Like, because when I drive, I actually lived in actually, where was this? Was this in Virginia for some reason?
Yes, Virginia.
Okay, yeah, I lived in Virginia. I drove around with a car with the paper tag in the back window, and I was conscious of it the whole time. He's probably saying what's going on to try to get them to say, it's your license plate, so that he can just calmly say, it's in the back window, dumbass.
Yeah, maybe.
That's my opinion.
The part of this clip that I think is kind of interesting is, he's like, look, I'm not comfortable. I don't feel safe getting out. Tell me what's going on. And that senior cop says, you should, what did he say? No, I messed up. I'm scared. I'm honestly scared to get out. And then he said, you should be. Right. I'm scared to get out. And he says, you should be. And then he grabs the handle and pulls on it to try and open the door.
I'm honestly afraid to get out. Can I?
Yeah, you should be. Get out.
What's going on?
Right. Like, so the big point for me that this is showing, again, this guy doesn't get shot or anything. He doesn't die. No. So it's a fairly good ending. Right. But, this is an example of unreasonable escalation from the get-go. Like, it doesn't need to be as escalated as it was. Right. And so from that point, that officer, again, his ego must be hurt that the guy's not listening to him.
That is 100% it. You can tell.
Even though he's not listening either and not actually answering the asked questions. So if you go to timestamp 235, hopefully you didn't close it all the way.
No, I got it.
From 235, we'll play it to about 320. So this is a longer play. It's about a minute long.
All right.
This is where they mace him.
Get out of the car.
Get your hands off me. 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 I didn't do anything. Don't do that.
Sir, get out of the car. Get out of the car now. Sir,
I'm trying to talk to you.
Okay.
I'm trying to talk.
Relax.
Can you please relax? Can you please relax?
Get out of the car right now.
This is not how you treat a vet. I'm actively serving this country, and this is how you're going to treat me. I didn't do anything. Whoa, hold on. What's going on? Hold on. Watch it.
Yeah, like.
Get out of the car. Get out of the car now. Get out of the car now.
Sorry, I'm not. That is fucked up.
Yeah, I'm not laughing. I'm not like we're not. I was laughing.
It's just so ridiculous.
Get out of the car. Get out of the car.
You're gonna get it again. Like, what is he disciplining a child here? Like, God,
get out of the car now.
So pause it real quick.
Get off the seat and get out of the car.
Pause it real quick, Nate.
Look, I'm just saying, just please.
You're going to control. Get out of the car.
Pause it real quick.
Take your seat off and get out. Look, take your seat off.
Look, my hands are out.
Take your seat off. Get out of the
My
car.
hands are out. My hands are out. Please. Please, look.
Yeah.
So one of the interesting things that happens from here on, you don't have to necessarily see it, but like he kept saying, like, I don't feel comfortable reaching for my seatbelt.
Yeah.
Right? Like that. His level of awareness in this situation is probably the only reason he survived everything. So it turns out he has a firearm in his vehicle. It's down right where his right knee would be. He's a lieutenant in the military. It's his service weapon. So he has a firearm in the vehicle, and so I mean, it's a good thing that things didn't go the other way. But not
just
that they would have.
You're not allowed to bring weapons on base. It might be different for them, but you're actually not supposed to.
He wasn't on base.
Firearms.
You mean carry off base?
Well, he's on uniform, which means he's either coming from base or going to base.
He was leaving an event and going back to base, possibly.
Base, yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know what he was.
Yeah,
he did say he was leaving a medical event and going somewhere else. But anyway, yeah, like the action of those cops is absolutely insane. And so if you watch that all the way through, their half hour or more after all that, he gets out. They get him out of the car, and then they wrestle him to the ground. So again, he's like trying to figure out what's going on. He can't really breathe. He's maced and all that.
Yep.
And he doesn't want to go down to the ground. And so they're like kicking him in the legs and all that to get him to go down. They finally get him to the ground and they cuff him. And then from that point, they start kind of being nice to him. They're like, "Hey, why didn't you just listen to us, man? This wasn't a big deal." Like, and he's like, "Dude," he's like, "I got pulled over. I look in my mirror and I got guns pulled on me." He's like, "I'm freaking, I'm paraphrasing here, but basically he's like, and they're like, they're trying to explain their side of it. And they continue to say, "Why didn't you just listen? Why didn't you just listen? It's your fault for not listening." And as a onlooker, I'm like, it's your fault for getting out of the car with your fucking gun drawn.
Yeah. Look,
like,
I'm going to put a soft devil's advocate in, just because nobody else here will. I'm the guy to do it.
One of us too.
Yeah, it's gonna be me. I am 100% like, this doesn't change the outcome at all. Like the fact that at least the senior cop got fired. I'm not sure. I think they both might have been. That's good. That is the proper outcome. This whole thing was a shit show from the beginning. I'm with him. I don't like. I don't. He should have gotten out of the car. I think. I know everybody likes to say like, "Oh no, you never know in today's climate you might get shot." Like, okay, you get shot when you do what the other guy did, and then she mistakes for the taser. You get shot when you fight with the cops. You don't get shot when you slowly and calmly comply. I think he should have gotten out of the car. I do.
And I looked into this because I was curious.
Yeah.
And legally, he had to get out of the car.
He had to.
Yeah. So I looked into this, and if you get stopped by a police officer, a legal stop, the stop has to be legal in the first place.
Yep.
If the stop is legal in the first place, which in this case I would say it is, his license wasn't properly displayed. And an officer orders you to get out of the vehicle, you have to comply. That's part of. That was a Supreme Court ruling at some point, based on officer safety, right?
Right, because the cops, they have to be able to, police you, right? So like, he is, that's all I'll say. I think he should have gotten out of the car. Activists, people on the left will probably disagree with me because it's like, oh no, you can't do that as a black man, you'll just get shot. Like, no, he had his hands out, he was very calm and controlled. If he had just opened up the door slowly and gotten out, it would have been fine. Yeah, it would have.
And I agree, he should have gotten out of the car. I don't think that was the first mistake, right? So let's take a step further back from that. Right?
Only mistake, right? That's it. The rest of it was just a shit show, a constant shit show. From
you take a step back from that, and that rookie cop that pulled him over, he's the one that gets out first and draws his gun, and then the senior officer pulls up second, and supports that action. I don't know if the senior cop would have done that or not on his own.
Correct. But there is a tendency to present a unified front.
Right. And so, but had the rookie cop pulled up and then just approach it like a normal traffic stop, which it was. And so the rookie cop tries to make his case in the videos, if you watch all of them. Where he's like, look, the reason we reacted this way is because you didn't pull over right away when we put our lights on. You drove for a while, then pulled over. And that's when he's like, dude, it was pitch black. We're in the middle of a stretch of dark road. He's like, I slowed down to like 10 miles an hour. So you knew that I knew you were there and that I was just going somewhere.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's pretty obvious Rookie's a hothead. He's like, how dare somebody drive away from me?
No, the Rookie's not that way.
You don't think so?
No, if you watch it and you listen to the Rookie talk, like, I think the Rookie was freaked out. Like,
he threw Yeah.
He's the one that drew his gun, but he's just saying, get out of the car. He's like, put your hands out, get out of your car, whatever. And then during the whole event, he is following the lead of the senior, but also like trying to calm things down in a way. Like he's not the senior is the one.
You're right. He did say a lot of things that were like kind of trying to reach out to him. He was trying to be more reasonable. He wasn't the ride the lightning guy. He wasn't the mace guy. He wasn't the
exactly, Amanda. That's an interesting thing. So Amanda says so many people drive the safe places before pulling over all the time. The senior cop even says that. The senior cop's like, the problem isn't. This is why I say the problem is that they drew their gun, by the way. But the senior cop says the problem isn't that you drove to a safe place. It happens all the time. It's that you didn't listen to us when we told you to get out of the car. Well, the reason he didn't listen is because you fucking pulled your gun.
I know, dude. Can you imagine? Like all this needed to be was them pulling into that parking lot. Nobody needed to pop out of their car with their gun. They just needed to do that stupid police thing where they sit behind you for 20 minutes while you're wondering what the fuck you did, while they're writing up a whole bunch of shit on their clipboard, and then they approach you and like, you got a license plate there, buddy? Like, that's all they needed to do.
Yeah.
And they came out with their...
Come up to the window, knock on it, and say, blah. Now, he does say, he's like, look, with BLM and all that, we're afraid for our lives, afraid for our jobs, just like you guys are afraid for your lives. Like, it's agreed. Cops are under a lot of pressure right now because of all this. There's no question about that. And I think that played a huge part into what was going on here. Like, I don't know if they knew he was black when they pulled him over and told him to put his hands out. I'm going to guess not, because if you look at that, everything's very tinted, right? So I don't know that they even knew it. Okay, I don't think race had anything to do with this.
No, I don't either.
As far as them being afraid of him, like that's why they wanted him to get out of the car. I don't think it had anything to do with it.
No, I don't either. I mean, I'm sure Chris probably believes that it stayed escalated because he was black. I would disagree with that, obviously, but that's that's something that
maybe, I don't know. That's one of those things you can't know.
No,
but yeah. So anyway, in my opinion, the cops were way out of line.
Yeah,
and they escalated in a position where they didn't need to. They had no reason.
Your use of force needed to be way drawn down, and he was just like messing around with the car door. Like, get the car door, and then leverage him out of the car if that's what you're going to do.
If you saw, he put his elbow around.
Once it was just still inappropriate for the civil.
Once they unlocked the car door, the driver put his elbow outside and held it closed.
I did see that, but what kind of weak ass like he's just using his elbow. He's not even grabbing it. Pull the door open. Anyways, okay, all right. So I think we agree.
So anyway, it's and then at the end they were like, hey, this can go one of two ways. We can either we can just act like this never happened. We can let you go. You don't get a ticket, or we can write you a ticket. And I've seen a lot of articles that say that the cops were
bribing.
Bribing, threatening, basically saying, hey, we're going to charge you if you tell anybody about this. But, if you just let it go, we'll let you go. That's not how I interpreted it.
No.
I interpreted it as them trying to endear to him their goodwill. Like, hey, we get this is a big fuck up. We could charge you. We're not going to, more along those lines.
I would say it's probably a guilty conscience speaking.
Yeah. But the whole situation is fucked up. By the way, I know the elderly cop got fired. I actually haven't seen confirmation that the younger cop did. And there's an outpouring of support for this for the individual. And to be honest, extremely impressed with his level of calmness and restraint under pressure and all of that. Like he held his own. So
okay, so one last thing before we close, and thanks everybody for hanging out with us so late. Do you think that if he had played the part of a hysterical person, if anybody would have cared about this? Like, and let me just explain. So if they'd pulled it and he'd like, I don't know, acted like a crazy person, like sticking his head out the window and like, what'd I do, man? Like hands up, what'd I do? And then he like puts his hands back in and he's being wild and agitated. Do you think anybody would have cared about this? Right. And it's the cops doing the same thing, but it's a different person on the other receiving end, which it matters obviously. But like, do you think anybody would have cared about this? Like the cops are still like, he went immediately to the guns for no reason, but it's just that the person at the other end maybe reacted different.
Yeah, it's a good point. I don't know. It definitely doesn't get the news coverage it did.
Right.
But
for sure. I mean, the compelling thing here obviously was his calm demeanor, his sustained calm demeanor in the face of this stuff. So, I mean, my only point is that it's like this stuff can be happening all of the time where it's an egregious abuse of police power and procedure, and they escalate way too much, but we don't see it because the people they play the part of the crazy victim, right? You know what I'm saying? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And if you read the comments, Daniel said he cares more about this guy. I think I'm not sure what he's saying there. Clarify, please. Military for one thing. That's a big part of it. A lot of people are playing up the military thing. I don't know if I
water with me.
I want to say I like that. Like, yeah, he's a military guy, but at the same time, like, people in the military can do bad shit too.
Yeah, they're just people. Everybody, I give you permission to judge them.
I want to say I agree. Like, yeah, he's in the military. Like, give him a break. But at the same time, it's like, I can tell you that he's probably more messed up than you. Forget what the point I was going to make now. Daniel, dang it, bud, sucker.
Well,
anyway,
we're super late, anyways.
Yeah. Hey, I appreciate everyone sticking with us this late. I know we had some technical issues, so
I guess try not to burn down the country. We're working at it. All right, we just pretty soon. I think next month we'll hit the 1 million follower mark, and by that time we'll be able to start impacting the culture.
Amanda, I think I agree with you, man. I agree. I feel like if he would have acted hysterical, if he would have made some other mistakes in this, we could be focusing on something else.
Yeah,
right?
And it makes you. It's just crazy. It's like, well, how many deaths were justified but could have been averted had the cops not gone full bore right away?
I know the point I was going to make now, so I'll close on this. If you read the comments in almost any of the videos on this particular one, over and over and over, you see, God, I just wonder how much police abuse there was before we had body cams.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm going to put that stat out there that there was one precinct where they put the body cameras in and reports against the police went down 90%. So that's anecdotal. It's one precinct, but I think it's not as bad as we think it was.
Well, hold on. It goes two ways. It also goes that they knew that they were being watched, so they stopped doing the shit.
Yes, correct. Yeah, good point. Good point. Good points all around. All right. I think that's it for tonight. Thanks, everybody. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. I plan on clipping out some of this, so take a look for those clips and let us know if you like those. As always, this is still the Left, Right, and Center show. We'll see you next time.
Peace.